Come, you accidental pilgrims who find yourself on a journey of surprise and wonder. Come, you who emerge into this place as an act of liberation. Come, you who seek a life of mindfulness and a place to test your thoughts. Come, you who bring hearts of all kinds, heavy hearts, rusty hearts, hearts broken, open in revelation, hearts full of love to share. Come, you who seek courage, and you who have more courage than you realize. Come, you who stand behind the curtain, gathering up the resources to claim your truth. Come, you who have been in a bubble, who are poised for transformation. We begin our story again, gathering courage, love, mindfulness, and a sense of purpose. We gather as a people of all ages, of different abilities, different backgrounds, and different perspectives. We share a covenant, a direction for our shared journey, and a commitment to encourage and challenge one another for spiritual growth. This path will ask much from us. Let us move forward with love. Let us move forward with appreciation for one another. Let us move forward knowing we are not alone. Whoever you are, whatever your gifts, you are welcome to join this journey. And at this time, we have an opportunity to light our candles of community. You can light a candle for a joy or a concern or simply to bring more light into our space.
Morning has come, now rise and greet the day. Dance with joy and sing a song of gladness. The light of hope it shines upon each face. May it bring faith to guide our journey home. A new day dawns, once more the gift is given. Wonder fills this moment shared together. The light of peace here shines upon each face. May it bring faith to guide our journey home. Open our eyes to see that life abounds. Open hearts to welcome it among us. The light of love here shines upon each face. May it bring faith to guide our journey home.
Let us stand and embody our spirit for the lighting of the chalice and our spoken affirmation. The word courage comes from the Latin cor, which means heart. According to the poet Mark Nepo, the original use of the word courage meant to stand by one's core, a striking concept that reinforces the belief found in almost all traditions, that living from the center is what enables us to face whatever life has to offer. To encourage means to hearten, to impart strength and confidence. This is our work as a religious community, to encourage one another to be bold in engaging the world around us, as well as what scares us internally, to give one another the confidence and the heart to live as fully as possible. So now with full hearts, we affirm our relationships with one another. We recognize our agency and our collective power, and we accept our responsibility to be bold and courageous. We light this chalice, symbol of all that we are, all that we have done together, and all that we will be as our shared ministry encourages those within and beyond our walls. Let us join together in the spoken affirmation. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth and freedom, and to help one another. You may be seated. Our opening thought comes from Sigmund Freud, from his work, Civilization and Its Discontents. Freud wrote, "Most people do not really want freedom because freedom involves responsibility, and most people are frightened of responsibility."
The promise of the Spirit, faith, hope, and love abide, and so every soul is blessed and made whole. The truth in our hearts is our guide. We are answering to the call of God. Hands joined together as hearts beat as one, emboldened by faith, we dare to proclaim we are answering to the call of love. Sometimes we build a barrier to keep love tightly bound, corrupted by fear, unwilling to hear, denying the beauty we found. We are answering to the call of love. Hands joined together as hearts beat as one, emboldened by faith, we dare to proclaim we are answering to the call of love. A bright new day is dawning, when love will not divide. Reflections of grace in every embrace, fulfilling the vision divine. We are answering to the call of love. Hands joined together as hearts beat as one, emboldened by faith, we dare to proclaim we are answering to the call of love. We are answering to the call of love.
Our next reading comes from Simone de Beauvoir, from her work, The Ethics of Ambiguity. She writes, A freedom which is interested only in denying freedom must be denied. And it is not true that is it not true that the recognition of freedom of others limits my own freedom? To be free is not to have the power to do anything you like. It is to be able to surpass the given toward an open future. The existence of others as a freedom defines my situation and is even the condition of my own freedom. I am oppressed if I am thrown into prison, but not if I am kept from throwing my neighbor into prison. Let us join together in a time of meditation, taking a few deep breaths in and out. In and out. We all take part in this ancient play. At some time, there is no other way. At some time, thieves guilty of poor choices, caught red-handed in our human reality. One points at the other and says, "You saved me." The other bows his head, "I accept responsibility. The mistakes I've made are real." At some time, believers excited to have found the answer. We follow those who lead the way. Bold and courageous, we leave behind the familiar until one day, unwilling to live through the anxiety of a new truth, we slip back to our old, familiar ways. At some time, bystanders, as the most frequent of our days are spent, watching others change and make change, busily focused on our needs, caring for our family, jobs, and friends, curious to know what the fuss is all about, watching and waiting to find out, oblivious to all that is underfoot, heads down, deadlines to meet, responsibilities weighing upon us. At some time, brokenhearted, weeping as truth is struck down by those in power, as if to say, "Don't you dare. Don't you dare keep trying. Who are you to weep, weeping at the loss, powerless, broken open by a love that never leaves us the same." At some time, we all play every part in this ancient play at some time. Our next reading is from H. Richard Niebuhr, from his work titled The Responsible Self. He writes, "Everyone with any experience of life is aware of the extent to which the characters of people they have known have been given their particular forms by the sufferings through which they have passed. But it is not simply what has happened to them that has defined them. Their responses to what has happened to them have been of even greater importance, and these responses have been shaped by their interpretations of what they suffered."
Though days be dark with storms and burdens weigh my heart, though troubles wait at every turn, I know I can go on. When sorrow heals my soul and burdens make me strong, though troubles wait at every turn, I know I can go on. My sister in my heart, my brother in my song, though troubles wait at every turn, I know I can go on. And though the journey is long, the destination is near. Though troubles wait at every turn, I know I can go on. So brothers, take my hand, and sisters, sing my song. When hope awaits at every turn, I know we will go on.
This morning, I'm going to be reflecting on the question, what is our responsibility? So as most of you know, I teach social and ecological ethics at Oklahoma City University. And in the discipline of ethics, one of the big questions that we ask ourselves is, what is our responsibility? Not only what is our personal responsibility, but also what is our social responsibility, and hopefully also what is our ecological responsibility. In my role as a professor of social and ecological ethics at Oklahoma City University, I direct an institute at the university. The institute is called the World House Institute for Social and Ecological, guess what the next word is? Responsibility. And in that institute, we have created a program called the World House Scholars Program for Social and Ecological Responsibility. So this topic, this concept of responsibility is something that has been very important for me, both personally and professionally. And when asking the question, what is our responsibility, it is easy, actually, for us to become a bit, maybe more than a bit, overwhelmed when we reflect on what our responsibility is. When we think of all the complex and difficult challenges that we're facing in the world and all that it will take to address those challenges, it's difficult to see how we as individuals can make a dent in dealing with them. It's difficult to see what we can do as individual persons to deal with the many problems that we're facing in the world. And when we look at those challenges, we may have a tendency to respond to them in a number of different ways. And I want to reflect on a few possible ways that we respond to them, some perhaps more healthy and more helpful than others. And then I want to look at how it is that we can work together to address these challenges in a responsible way while realizing that we are not responsible as individuals for everything that is wrong in the world, and therefore we are not responsible as individuals for fixing it all by ourselves. But that doesn't mean we don't have responsibility to do something. When we look at the global challenges that we're facing, perhaps the most significant one, the one that will have the greatest impact on our lives in human community over the next decades, the ecological crisis. Many persons, when looking at that crisis, just seem to be going on with business as usual, as if there's really nothing bad happening in relation to the environment in terms of our impact on it. And many persons don't want to believe that we as human beings can cause the devastating impact that we're causing on the planet as a whole. And so a common response to the ecological crisis that we're facing is the response to deny that the reality is a crisis. To just simply say, it isn't so. It's not as bad as people are saying. And this response is the response or the stance of denial. And denial does not get you very far on the path to responsibility. It tends to keep us looking away from what's actually happening. It tends to keep us moving away from what we need to be doing as persons and societies to deal with the crisis at hand. Now, other people look at the ecological crisis. Many of us look at the ecological crisis, and we seem to know that it's really a crisis. We recognize that there is a problem. When we look at all the other crises in the world, the wars and the injustices and the poverty, we know that there is a problem. But some persons who know there's a problem in the pursuit for economic gain act as if there isn't a problem in order to gain more profit and live their vision of a life of comfort, a comfortable life. This is not the stance of denial. That's the stance of greed. That's the stance of self-centeredness, of selfishness. There are others who know that there's a crisis, social and ecological crisis, but they're so overwhelmed by their seeming lack of ability to bring about change that they continue to live as they have always lived. What can we do? Would be the response of these persons. It's all too much for us to do anything in relation to this. There's no way that we can solve all these problems. And so persons who are coming from this stance believe that changing their behavior really won't make a difference. Changing their behavior won't do anything to solve the problems we are currently facing. This is the stance of apathy. Apathy. And apathy is often coupled with despair. Denial, greed, apathy, these are often the responses that many of us have to the challenges that we are facing. But there are others who know that the crisis we are facing is real, and they want to do something positive to change it. And they're willing to make a commitment to change both their views and their habits, to live more sustainable lives, to live lives of justice, to work to solve as much as they possibly can in the context in which they live, the social and ecological problems that we're facing, to work to bring about a better future for all life and a better present for all life. There are many persons who care about the planet. There are many persons who care about the human community, and they're doing something positive to live in a sustainable relationship with their ecological communities and to live in a just relationship with their human communities. This is the stance of responsibility. This is the stance of responsibility. When we hear the many daunting realities of the crises we're facing, it's easy to become discouraged. I know that I've become discouraged on a number of occasions and wondered what can be done to actually make things better. It's easy to come to the conclusion that things are simply too far gone, that there are too many people in the world who do not care. Or even if they do care, they don't have the ability to bring about the significant change that is necessary to create a more just and sustainable world. There are days when it all seems to be just too much to handle. The overwhelming complexity, the magnitude of our social and ecological problems can lead even the most committed persons to have some times of apathy based on a sense of the impossibility of making a difference. There are also times when we see all of these problems and the feeling we have is one of despair, even if we care about them. Even if we're attempting to do all that we can to address them, we all have our days where we experience despair, or at least a deep sorrow for what future generations of life will have to bear because of our actions, or in some cases because of our inaction in relation to the environment and in relation to injustice in society. And when the temptation of apathy or the feelings of despair are strong, we must draw deeply from the well of love. From the well of love that we have for one another, from the well of love that we have for all life on earth. Even though the best or ideal future may no longer be possible or may not be attainable, it's always possible to create a better future than would exist if we were simply to act out of denial, greed, or apathy. It is our sacred responsibility to take care of the community of life, to cultivate empathy for all life, to cultivate a way of living in ways that are sustainable, and to live as if the future matters so that future generations of life might experience our ecological community in all of its beauty, in all of its diversity, in all of its fullness. Fulfilling this sacred responsibility is going to take a lot more than just our changes in personal behavior. It's more than switching out light bulbs. It's more than driving more fuel-efficient cars, although those are important things to do. It's going to take more than that. It's going to take a radical shift in our consciousness. It's going to take a radical shift in the way that we relate to each other. It's going to require radical systemic change. And even if our efforts are ultimately unsuccessful in avoiding the worst case scenarios, even if that's the case, we will at the very least contribute to communities in the meantime where deep and meaningful relationships are fostered with other persons and with all of life. And in the midst of so much denial, so much greed, so much apathy and despair, perhaps even in the worst of times, we can live the responsible life and engage in a process of radical and loving transformation of the world. So in the midst of this complexity, in the midst of all these challenges, the challenge for us is to see ourselves as members of an interdependent whole in which our personal responsibility and our social responsibility and our ecological responsibility are all connected together. We are persons who are not alone. We are persons who are not islands. We are not just individuals. We are persons in community. And we are persons in ecological community. And this calls us to cultivate our responsible selves in a responsible society for the sake of all life. But we shouldn't be fooled into thinking that everything is our responsibility. We shouldn't be fooled into thinking that it is all up to us. We should not be fooled into thinking that what is happening in the world is all our fault, or that it is up to us alone to fix it. That's not the case. Actually, there are a lot of entities in the world that would like for us to think that it's all our fault as individuals, that it's just about individual behavior, and if we just acted more personally responsible, then things would be better in the world. They'd like us to focus on our individual personal behavior rather than seeing the systemic change, the systemic transformation, the systemic injustices, the systemic unsustainability that must be brought about for us to address these challenges. There are actually two examples of how entities that want us to focus on our personal behavior, our personal responsibility, in order for us to not really look at the systemic issues. There are two examples of how that's played out recently, just in the last couple of decades. How many of you have ever had an opportunity to look online and see a very interesting instrument called the ecological footprint quiz? Or sometimes it's a carbon footprint quiz. Anybody ever looked on? A few of you have done this. I have my environmental ethics classes look at these ecological footprint quizzes. And what they are is a set of questions that ask you about your individual behavior when it comes to sustainability. It asks you what kind of car you drive, how many miles you drive a week, it asks you what kind of food you eat, what kind of home you have, what kind of utilities you have in terms of what's the energy source for your utilities. It asks you if you live in a one-family home, how many square feet are in your home, a number of questions. And then after you answer all these questions, the ecological footprint quiz tells you how many Earths would be necessary if everyone on Earth lived like you do. And of course, the average for us in the United States is somewhere between 3 and 4 Earths would be necessary if everybody in the world lived like we do. And so every time I take that quiz with my students, I look at that and just go, oh, there's no way. There's no way I'm going to get down below 3 Earths. Or 2.5. I think the lowest I got was 2.3 one time in a good year, which wasn't a good year. I think it was the pandemic and I wasn't doing any traveling. There's no way. You can't do it. And so oftentimes what happens when people focus on this is they just say, oh, I can't do that. I'm already doing all these things and I still need 3 Earths for everybody to live like I do. And so that can lead to apathy. Or sometimes people will look at that and they'll go, okay, I've just got to change everything about my life. I'm going to have a garden. I'm going to, ride my bicycle to work. And they just change their entire lives and focus solely on, what their personal behavior can be like in order to bring about change. Do you know what entity really promoted the use of the ecological footprint as a tool to get people to think about their responsibility as it relates to the environment? The fossil fuel industry promoted the ecological footprint as a tool because the fossil fuel industry knew that if they could get people focusing on their individual behavior and not the systemic issues like being dependent as a system, as an economic system, transportation systems, agricultural systems on fossil fuel, if we could focus people on their individual behavior, they would move away from focusing on the systemic changes that needed to happen. Genius PR work on the part of the fossil fuel industry in that. And then recycling. Recycling. I know that at the university, we've not done a very great job of recycling over the years, and our students are constantly reminding the university of the fact that the university is not doing enough in relation to recycling. And so every once in a while, there'll be a push and more recycling will happen. And in Oklahoma City, where I live, we've had recycle bins for many, many years now. And a lot of people feel great about the fact that not only do we have recycle bins now, but we have larger recycle bins now that are the same size as our trash cans. And so it's really fun when you can get your recycle bin to have as much stuff in it as you have in your trash can. You feel like you're doing something. Personal responsibility, personal behavior, making a change. Of course, we've learned recently that a lot of the things that we send to be recycled aren't actually being recycled. The percentage of things that are put into the recycling system is not as high as we would want it to be. That doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. I think it's still better to recycle than not to recycle, but it's not going to be what changes the world and makes it sustainable. If our focus is simply on recycling, simply on our personal behavior, these changes in the world that we need will not take place. You know what industry got us to really focus on recycling as the way to address our ecological, our environmental problems? The fossil fuel industry. Most of the stuff that we recycle that's the most difficult to recycle is coming from fossil fuels, our plastics. And the plastics are very difficult to recycle, but the fossil fuel industry knew that if they could get us focused on recycling plastic and feeling like we could make a difference by recycling the plastic that's being created, rather than focusing on reducing our use of plastic, rather than focusing on not using plastic at all, rather than focusing on keeping wasteful packaging from being used in our products, if we could get the focus to be on recycling, then there wouldn't be a focus on a systemic change to actually stop using plastics as much as we possibly can, which is an incredibly important thing to do, especially given the fact that we've got basically islands of plastic goo that are in our oceans, one of which that I know most about in the Northeast Pacific is twice the size of the state we're currently sitting in. So it's not all about our personal behavior. It's not all about us and what we can fix and what we can do just through our personal lives. It's about systemic change. It's about systemic transformation. It's about working together in larger communities and societies as a whole to make transformation in our systems for more sustainability and more justice. So then, when we look at that, we ask ourselves, what do we do in relation to that? Well, we engage politically. We engage in our communities. We engage in ways that are going to make a difference in making those systemic changes. And we don't give up our individual behavior changes either. We still try to do that as well, because as the Pirkei Avot, which is a text of Jewish wisdom, tells us, that when we look at all these challenges and all the complexities that we're facing, and there are times when we feel like there's nothing we can do, that we ought to give up, this text of wisdom reminds us that we are not obligated to complete the work. We are not obligated as individuals, even as small communities, even as the whole human community, we're not obligated to complete the work, but neither are we free to abandon it. At this time, we have a time for our morning offering, and there are opportunities to give online as well.
We are building a new way. We are building a new way. We are building a new way, feeling stronger every day. We are building a new way. We can feed our every need. Every need. We can feed our every need. Every need. We can feed our every need. Start with love, that is the seed. We can feed our every need. Peace and freedom is our cry. Peace and freedom is our cry. Peace and freedom is our cry. Without these, our world will die. Peace and freedom is our cry. We are building a new way. We are building a new way. We are building a new way, feeling stronger every day. We are building a new way. A new way, a new way, a new way.
Let us stand together in body or spirit for our parting thought and the extinguishing of the chalice. Our parting thought comes from John Stuart Mill and his work on liberty. He wrote, "A person may cause evil to others, not only by their actions, but by their inaction. And in either case, they are justly accountable to them for the injury." Let us join together in extinguishing the chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitments. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.